as it's usually referred to, is very likely to be adopted today by the NCOP. This bill will much strengthen central government's or provincial government's control over education and take power away from parental governing boards. It does some other things. For example, it will make grade R, also known as grade naught, a permanent feature of all public schools, and will abolish all forms of corporal punishment, including verbal, which can belittle pupils. Now, I'm not entirely sure how they're going to necessarily police that one, but the much more significant problems with the bill are that it allows provincial government officials to override elected school governing bodies in the name of, quote, the needs in general of the broader community. Now, if you think that's a bit vague and kind of a license for sort of almost any action to be taken for almost any reason, you'd be correct. We could see all sorts of negative consequences from bad schooling practices protected by provincial officials, to enforcement of demographic representativity in schools, to reducing the number of schools that are single medium Afrikaans schools. There's all sorts of stuff that could go on as a result of the centralization, and quite clearly centralizing in almost every single other facet of South African life, whether it's sort of the police or the economy or whatever, has not been a particularly successful enterprise. Makone, what do you make of the bill? This is something, obviously, I think that the fight needs to continue on, perhaps in the courts if possible. But once again, we're seeing this sort of ideological drive to reduce the power of individual people, in this case, parents, who have, of course, the most care for their kids, and putting it into the hands of government officials. What do you make of the story?
Yeah, Nick, I'm a bit concerned about that as well, about the loss of autonomy of school governing bodies, right? Because I think the idea is that some of the decisions that would be made by school governing bodies will now be taken away, and that power will be vested in a departmental head of department, which means that school governing bodies, which obviously know the unique circumstances of the school over which they are administrators of, would appreciate more and be in a better position to also expedite decisions quickly in making policy over the school. That, if you can imagine, running it through a centralized system like a departmental head of department would take forever, because school governing bodies are also assigned to individual schools, where a head of department of any department of education, provincial departments of education, would be overseeing thousands, tens of thousands of schools. So decision making in schools will certainly be slowed by this, which I'm really not sure what the government is getting at slowing down efficiency. But something that you also pointed to was the issue of vagueness, which I'm noticing a pattern here, that when bills are rushed through to Parliament, they don't take the time to make clauses out to be specific. And without certainty, that leaves a lot of room for a lot of discretion, a lot of interpretation by various individuals. And this is something that we made the case for in the expropriation bill and the expropriation process as well, that it was rushed through to Parliament and for the president to bring it to assent. We're seeing that now with BELA as well, that I think the public was only given 30 days to review a bill of its length, of its expanse, of all the different arenas that it covers, its scope, it being rushed to Parliament and the public only being given 30 days. That's not true public participation. It's just another one of those box ticking exercises. It's not nearly sufficient to give people only 30 days. But also, you see what happens when bills are rushed through to Parliament, is that they're so vague that they leave a lot of room for interpretation, which is not good. I must say, though, that I'm quite open to seeing grade R become compulsory. I think we need more early childhood development and early childhood development centers in South Africa. But I am worried about the loss of autonomies of individual schools, and I would like to see that specifically be reversed.
Yeah, I think the much better solution here, rather than this bill, which sort of disempowers parents who have more influence over school governing boards, would be to empower parents, perhaps through something like a school voucher system, which would allow those parents to choose the school that's right for their kid and give that school the resources it needs to educate their child. It's students that care the most. It's parents that care the most about how their kids perform in schools. And if there's anything we've seen from government, particularly provincial governments in many places in the country over the last couple of years, is that empowering some official who has no contact with the people being involved here is not likely to be good for them. See, for example, the Life Esidimeni case, where provincial negligence led to the deaths of so many. Okay, let us go on to our next story, and this is about the sort of ongoing trouble inside the new MK party. And it's kind of interesting to examine this because MK was expected to make this very big splash, and they're very likely to still make a pretty big splash in our politics, particularly for a first-time party. But their momentum seems to have been slowed a little bit due to some internal squabbling, namely between a faction which started the party, allegedly at Jacob Zuma's instruction, led by Jabulani Khumalo, and a faction led by Zuma. And these two seem at odds with each other. Recently, the Khumalo faction threw out the MK interim youth leader for his connections to incitement of violence against the election process. He now seems to have been reinstated, or at least put back on the campaign trail. It's not really clear with MK who's in what position when. After all, currently Jacob Zuma and Jabulani Khumalo, I believe, are both declaring themselves leader of the party. But anyway, the now reinstated youth leader said that he is born again and he will no longer put threats on the election. He also rejected the influence of old people on the youth league, saying, I will lead the youth league, but I won't leave it in a messy state damaged by old people. Here we have no friends and allies. No one is irreplaceable in this organization, including myself. No one is born with a position. So when you are given a command, take command. And yeah, he's, shall we say, quite a colorful character. Makone, what do you make of what's going on in the MK party at the moment?
I wonder about these specific statements of being born again. I always find these religious-esque statements in the political arena that are very sanctimonious to be so cringe. Like I don't understand to what end words, phrases like born again are being used in the political arena. But I think of this guy, particularly the MK party youth leader. He is a clone of Julius Malema, not only in his posture, but also in some of his statements. He's plagiarized Malema verbatim, saying things like he's willing to die for Jacob Zuma. I'm just thinking that is not revolutionary, I'm afraid. We've heard those statements being said some 15 years ago by Julius Malema. So I'm guessing that's the sort of leadership that the MK party wants to attract in mobilizing the youth. I also want to say that expert panel that was assembled by the president to look into the violence and the incitement of violence going into those July 2021 riots, that one of the panelists made this point of being wary of veiled threats that come as just ordinary political messaging or political statements. This is certainly one of them, the threat to topple elections over a Concord decision. It's also an attempt to intimidate the Constitutional Court into a position. He's made those statements even about the Chief Justice, who's, by the way, is leaving in 3 months, that he's bought and he's a spy and he's bought and sold by various political and capitalist camps. I can see the sort of leadership that the MK party wants to attract, especially in its youth ranks, in mobilizing the youth. I think it's just carbon copy of young, at least young Julius Malema.
Might explain a little bit why some of the polling suggests that the MK is actually eating a bit of the EFF's vote. We'll obviously have to see on election day, but I would not be surprised, in particular in KZN, the EFF suffers a little bit due to the appearance of MK on the political scene. All right, and lastly, we're going to very briefly talk about posters. So, of course, if you have been driving around or walking around South Africa at all, you will see that many of the election posters are up. Depends where you live, which posters you'll see. But, we've got a pretty good idea of what most of the political parties' posters are looking like now. The Daily Maverick did a piece reviewing all of the posters, sort of a slightly silly, humorous review by Rebecca Davis. I didn't think those reviews were that good, but, we can, I think, give our own opinion on what we think are the best and worst posters. Now, I'm going to go first, and somewhat perhaps unexpectedly for me, I think that one of the EFF posters, the one with Julius Malema's face, is actually not that bad. Firstly, it has the election date, which is always useful to have to educate voters. It just says vote EFF, and then it's got a picture of Julius Malema on it, and he's actually looking much less I'm going to burn down the country and slit the throat of whiteness, and a lot more sort of like, hey guys, vote for me. I'm just your regular old juju. And I actually think it's a pretty effective poster. It's, Julius looks friendly. The background and the coloring is clear, and I think it's a pretty good poster. The worst poster, there's a lot of bad posters this election cycle, but I think I'm going to have to go with the IFP's poster. They always have their slogan on the top, which I've never been a particular fan of, which is "Trust Us." It's also very kind of like glaring when it's on a on a poster sort of in public. And then goes on to say, "We work for you," and then it has hashtag "Do It for Shenge," and it's got a picture of recently deceased IFP leader or former IFP leader Buthelezi on it. Now, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of putting your former leader on the poster. I get it. I get they're saying, come out and show your support for the IFP one last time if you respected Buthelezi, but I don't think it's a good poster. Makone, your best and worst poster this election cycle?
Yeah, this was a bit of a toughie, Nick. I'm going to group mine because I couldn't pick one in some of these instances. But in first place for me, I think the best poster would be the Mkhonto Wesizwe one. I think they're really sticking it to the ANC with that one, which I think their whole political party exists to sort of troll the ANC. Initially, it was funny, but I think we've seen how seriously the ANC is starting to take the MK presence on the political scene, that it stopped being funny when the ANC lost a bunch of wards to the MK. I like that it's simple, it's clean as well. It's not even a one-liner, it's a one-word, a hashtag Maibuye and vote MK with the face of the former president, which for me, this picture looks like one of the pictures he took while he was president of South Africa under the ANC, and the hashtag Maibuye, which translates to bring it back. I think they mean bring back the country from the ANC. I don't think they mean Maibuye from apartheid times, which typically that sort of statement used to mean. But I think this one specifically is directed at the ANC. I also think that's why the IFP's response has been to place the deceased Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi on their poster. They've had to summon their dead to sort of challenge someone of Jacob Zuma's magnitude. He is one of the most popular politicians in South Africa, so I can see why the IFP would respond with that. Whether or not it's a response, I actually do not know. That's just my own assessment for purposes of rating these posters. In last place is Good. I am sorry. Good's poster looks like something that emerged from a 70s vinyl music cover. Stop the suffering, switch to good. It says the stop the suffering message, it's good. It's a call to come in and vote and end a myriad of things. You could think stop the suffering from crime or load shedding or this or that. I'm just particularly not impressed with this poster. It's also one of those posters that are landscape, done in landscape. I'm not a fan, I'm afraid. So I'm sorry, but good is last place for me.
Yeah, I must say that Stop the Suffering, I don't know, it's not a great poster. It's also like the sort of weird clash of colors. It just doesn't look good. But anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Hope you found the show interesting. We will be back tomorrow, The Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone. The Daily Friend Show and The Daily Friend are a project of the Institute of Race Relations, the IRR. The IRR is a think tank which was founded in 1929 to study race relations in South Africa and works to change government policy to improve race relations through non-racialism and to ensure the prosperity of all South Africans. If you like our work and would like to support us, please go to irr.org.za and click Support the IRR, or you can go to thedailyfriend.co.za and click the Fund Us button.